First of all, I want to start out by saying hello to our friend from New Bern, North Carolina. Thank you for joining us, and I was really touched that you've actually acquired the books that we're reading in order to follow with us, and that brings me great joy because that's certainly not what we anticipated would happen when we started recording these. This was a very local thing for many years and has continued actually for many years, and we're all a very happy gathering of Bodhisattvas of the earth, so to be able to share our faith with other people is something that we really feel very fortunate to be able to do, and thank you for joining us.
Yes.
All right, so this week we're reading President Ikeda's lecture on the Sutra of True Requital from Volume 1, and we're going to page 105. This is lecture chapter number 7, and I'm going to go ahead and start reading from the Gosho. The passage of study for this lecture, the Sutra of True Requital, Nichiren Daishonin's vow and tireless struggle for the enlightenment of women. This sutra is superior to all other sutras. It is like the lion king, the monarch of all the creatures that run on the ground, and like the eagle, the king of all the creatures that fly in the sky. Sutras such as the Devotion to Amida Buddha Sutra are like pheasants or rabbits. Seized by the eagle, their tears flow. Pursued by the lion, fear grips their bowels. And the same is true of people like the Nembutsu adherents, the precepts priests, the Zen priests, and the true word teachers. When they come face to face with the votary of the Lotus Sutra, their color drains away and their spirits fail. Going on, he says, for all those who wished to believe in the Lotus Sutra and yet could not do so with complete certainty, the 5th volume presents what is the heart and core of the entire sutra, the doctrine of attaining Buddhahood in one's present form. It is though, for instance, a black object were to become white, black lacquer to become like snow, an unclean thing to become clean and pure, or a wish-granting jewel to be placed in muddy water to make it transparent. Here it is told how the dragon girl became a Buddha in her reptilian form, and at that moment there was no longer anyone who doubted that all men could attain Buddhahood. This is why I say that the enlightenment of women is expounded as a model. Continuing. Now I, Nichiren, was born as a human being, something difficult to achieve, and I have encountered the Buddha's teachings which are but rarely to be met with. Moreover, among all the teachings of the Buddha, I was able to meet the Lotus Sutra. When I stopped to consider my good fortune, I realized that I am indebted to my parents, indebted to the ruler, and indebted to all living beings. With regard to the debt of gratitude owed to our parents, our father may be likened to heaven and our mother to the earth, and it would be difficult to say to which parent we are more indebted. But it is particularly difficult to repay the great kindness of our mother. Since I have realized that only the Lotus Sutra teaches the attainment of Buddhahood by women, and that only the Lotus Sutra is the Sutra of True Requital for repaying the kindness of our mothers, in order to repay my debt to my mother, I have vowed to enable all women to chant the Daimoku of this sutra. Buddhism in Japan today is exactly like this. It is merely plots and rebellions in a different form. The Lotus Sutra represents the supreme ruler, while the True Word School, the Pure Land School, the Zen School, and the Precepts Priests, by upholding such minor sutras as the Mahayana Sutra and the Meditation on the Buddha Infinite Life Sutra, have become the deadly enemies of the Lotus Sutra. And yet women throughout Japan, unaware of the ignorance of their own minds, think that Nichiren, who can save them, is their foe, and mistake the Nembutsu, Zen, Precepts, and True Word Priests, who are in fact deadly enemies, for good friends and teachers. And because they look upon Nichiren, who is trying to save them, as a deadly enemy, these women all join together to slander him to the ruler of the country, so that after having been exiled to the province of Izu, he was also exiled to the province of Sado. Nevertheless, when I was exiled to the province of Sado, the constable of the province and other officials following the design of the ruler of the nation treated me with animosity. Every single steward and Nembutsu believer worthy of the name kept strict watch on my hut day and night, determined to prevent anyone from communicating with me. Never in my lifetime will I forget how in those circumstances you, with a butsubo carrying a wooden container of food on his back, came in the night again and again to bring me aid. It was just as if my deceased mother had suddenly been reborn in the province of Sado. And then we'll begin with the lecture on page 108. President Ikeda says, quotes from the Gosho, in order to repay my debt to my mother, I have vowed to enable all women to chant the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra. This passage is the crux of the Sutra of True Requital, the writing of Nichiren Daishonin that we will study in this chapter. It articulates the primary inspiration for the Daishonin's vow to open the way for the enlightenment of all people. Okay, so what inspired the Daishonin's quest to find salvation for all mankind by upholding the correct teaching? It was the vow to save his mother. It was the desire to save his mother. Okay, manifest the power of the mystic law with sincere faith. In order to repay my debt to my mother, what a beautifully succinct yet profound expression of the humanistic spirit of Nichiren Buddhism. To repay our debt of gratitude to our mothers, who gave birth to us, raised us, and protected us, is an important principle of Buddhism. It could be said that, in a sense, Buddhism seeks to teach us to emulate this spirit of motherly compassion in our interaction with others. In an early Buddhist scripture, Shakyamuni Buddha instructs, just as a mother would protect her life with her own son, her only son, so one should cultivate an unbounded mind toward all living beings and loving kindness toward all the world. It may be no exaggeration to say that motherly compassion is identical to the heart of the Buddha, which all living beings inherently possess. A mother's compassion or love for her only child is directly linked to the concern or loving kindness of the Buddha for all living beings. To experience a mother's love and compassion is to experience the heart of the Buddha. All of us are beneficiaries of the great spiritual blessings of motherly love and compassion. It is an unfortunate reality in our world, however, that many mothers lead lives filled with suffering and sorrow. This is because people's hearts are ruled by self-interest, calculation, and rivalry, polar opposites of compassion. Constantly, as a youth, deeply sensitive to the profound debt he owed his mother, Nichiren Daishonin began studying Buddhism in order to fundamentally free his mother from suffering. Referring to the basic aspiration that should be cherished by those who would renounce secular life, he writes, listen to this because this applies to all of us. When a man leaves his parents and home and becomes a monk or an adult, he should always have as his goal the salvation of his father and his mother. This is parent-teacher sovereign, right? This is very important to understand. How you feel about your parents, how you live your life in accord with a desire for their happiness as well as your own, is fundamental to you achieving Buddhahood in your present form. Frankly speaking, if you've had a falling out with a close relative or someone that's a member of your family, it's up to you to reconcile that. You can never not care about whether or not they attain Buddhahood. You must always pray for them. This must always be something that matters to you. All right? So he's saying, further, following his exhaustive study of the Buddhist sutras and commentaries, he came to the clear realization and understanding that the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, is the law that enables all living beings to attain Buddhahood. He therefore vowed to enable all women to chant the Daimoku of this sutra. So, when he was 12 years old and he entered the seminary, what was the thing that burnished him toward ultimately at the age of 31 before he went back to Seikoji Temple for that, April 28th, 1253? What happened all that time prior to that? He was studying the sutras for the sake of trying to understand how to be able to contribute to the salvation of his mother. Do you understand? So to some degree, this desire is what propelled the salvation of all humankind as it relates to the opening of the way of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo and the Buddhism, the sowing. Do you understand? What led him to understand how to save his mother is what led him to understand how to save all living beings. Without that love for mother and without that desire to save mother, the ability to save all living beings could not have been accomplished. Do you understand? So that's the significance. When we do one thing, many other things occur as a result. Understand that always. We may have a specific goal in front of us, but we can never see how wide and how broadly that single act will ultimately spread. It's no different than somebody in New Bern, North Carolina, listening to what I'm saying right now. Okay, it wasn't the intent, it wasn't planned, it worked out that way. Okay, the idea, though, is to uphold your function as a bodhisattva of the earth, and that's to cherish your mother and father. A part of that is that's part of the deal. That's if you're going to be a mentor, you must have the ability to convey that through your actions, not just words. Now, you've all seen how I treat my parents. Okay, that's because of Buddhism. That's not because of anything else. That's because of the training Nichiren gave me in reading all of his writings. That's how I learned to have that kind of an attitude toward my parents. It was not naturally instilled in me by my family, by my childhood, or by Christianity. Frankly speaking, Christianity doesn't deal with mom and dad as much as it does with me and God. You know, screw everybody else. So, he's saying, of course, the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra is the supreme teaching of Buddhism for all living beings, not only women. However, the first example of the Lotus Sutra's central principle that all living beings can attain Buddhahood in their present form is that of the Dragon King's daughter. In other words, a female practitioner becoming a Buddha. And notice that he says, does he say a female believer? No. President Ikeda qualifies this issue of practitioner. Again, going back to President Makaguchi's position that, you know, give me one practitioner for 100 believers. Because it takes practice to actually demonstrate what's required for people to do human revolution and attain Buddhahood in their present form. If there are no examples, no one will be able to do it. This is our job. This also illustrates that deep sincerity in faith. In other words, what's deep sincerity in faith? That's the same mind as Nichiren, caring about Kosen Rufu as much as you care about your own benefit. Practicing for the sake of the law as much as practicing for the sake of your own ease of life, right? This also illustrates that deep sincerity in faith, which women are particularly noted for, is the key to manifesting the power of the mystic law in one's own life. I do indeed feel that women possess a natural inclination to cherish and nurture life, as symbolized by a mother's love and compassion. Thus, when women awaken to the mystic law, they can readily and directly tap into the life state of Buddhahood, in which compassion manifests as wisdom, and wisdom manifests as compassion. Because of their pure-hearted spirit, they can embrace sincere and unswerving faith in Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, which is the seed for Buddhahood. All right? And this role of the female is the same in almost all species, by the way. Okay, this loving, nurturing, make sure that the next generation survives in order to maintain the species. Really, Dad provides a cell, and he's off. Okay, and a lot of the time, it's up to Mom. Mom is the one that holds everything together. The lay nun Shinichi, the recipient of the Sutra of True Requital, exemplified such faith. Nichiren wrote this letter on July 28, 1278, and had it delivered to her by her husband, the lay priest of Butsubo, who had traveled all the way from Sado Island to visit him at Mount Minobu. It is a reply to Shinichi's letter to Nichiren that a Butsubo had brought with him. In his response, the Daishonin begins by restating briefly what she had written to him. In the letter, she says that, though she had been concerned about the faults and impediments that prevent women from gaining enlightenment, since according to my teaching, the Lotus Sutra puts the attainment of Buddhahood by women first, she relies on the Lotus Sutra in all matters. From the sentiments expressed by Shinichi, we can surmise that Nichiren's confident assurances about the enlightenment of women based on the Lotus Sutra must have been a source of immense hope and inspiration for women of his day. And don't forget how many times he's writing to women as major contributors to the support process of propagation of his teaching. In this writing, wishing to strengthen Shinichi's conviction in her capacity to convince her that she is the Buddha, exactly as she is. He says, in this writing, wishing to strengthen Shinichi's conviction in her capacity to gain enlightenment. In other words, to reject all the teachings of the expedient means sutras. The Daishonin explains that the dragon girl's attainment of Buddhahood in her present form is the heart and core of the Lotus Sutra. He also explains that the enlightenment of women in particular is the foundation of his very own vow to propagate the law, and he outlines the great struggle he has been waging toward that end. I can vividly picture Shinichi with this letter in hand, joyfully sharing its inspiring message with her fellow practitioners on Sado. Let us study the Sutra of True Requital while reflecting on the significance of the tremendous efforts Nichiren made to fulfill his vow to enable all women to attain Buddhahood. And so now we will begin the actual lecture. Are they quieting down back there? Okay. I didn't know if that's where anybody went. All right. So, continuing on page 110 at the top. The Lotus Sutra is foremost among all the Buddhist teachings. This sutra is superior to all other sutras. It is like the Lion King, the monarch of all the creatures that run on the ground, and like the eagle, the king of all the creatures that fly in the sky. Sutras such as the devotion to Amida Buddha Sutra are like pheasants or rabbits. Seized by the eagle, their tears flow. Pursued by the lion, fear grips their bowels. And the same is true of people like the Nimbutsu adherents, the precepts priests, the Zen priests, and the true word teachers. When they come face to face with the votary of the Lotus Sutra, their color drains away and their spirits fail. For all those who wish to believe the Lotus Sutra, and yet could not do so with complete certainty, the 5th volume presents what is the heart and core of the entire sutra, the doctrine of attaining Buddhahood in one's present form. It is as though, for instance, a black object were to become white, black lacquer to become like snow, an unclean thing to become clean and pure, or a wish-granting jewel to be placed into muddy water to make it transparent. Here it is told how the dragon girl became a Buddha in her reptilian form, and at that moment there was no longer anyone who doubted that all men can attain Buddhahood. This is why I can say the enlightenment of women is expounded as a model. President Ikeda's lecture. Nichiren Daishonin stresses that all of the many Buddhist scriptures, Nichiren Daishonin stresses that of all the many Buddhist scriptures, the Lotus Sutra alone contains the Buddha's true teaching. He declares it is like the Lion King, the monarch of all the creatures that run on the ground, and like the eagle, the king of all the creatures that fly in the sky. The primary reason the Lotus Sutra is designated as the King of Sutra is its teaching of universal enlightenment. What's that mean? It's teaching of what? That everyone is a Buddha already exactly as they are. All right? That the 10th world is already present in the 9 worlds and is always already present in the 9 worlds. Everybody's with me? Yes. So that's what universal enlightenment is. It's the fact that Buddhahood is not something people gain, it's something that they reveal. Okay? Understand that. So that's why everybody's already the Buddha and should be respected as such, and why this teaching is specifically for all living beings. He says the primary reason is that this is the teaching of universal enlightenment. This teaching is elucidated in the doctrines of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life and the mutual possession of the 10 worlds. What's he talking about? Actual Ichiden and Sanzen. Okay? And the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings assert that Buddhahood can be attained only after eradicating the earthly desires of the 9 worlds from hell through the world of Bodhisattva. The Lotus Sutra, by contrast, teaches the mutual possession of the 10 worlds. The fact that the 10th is already always in all 9. It explains that all living beings in the 9 worlds have the capacity to reveal their inherent Buddhahoods as they are, without having to undergo countless eons of austere practices. All right? Right. Okay, so that's the whole reason we do this, is to be Buddhas in our present form. Everybody understands, right? The dragon girl, who in the Lotus Sutra's 12th chapter instantly attains Buddhahood without changing her form, exemplifies this fundamental principle. The Daishonin notes that simply asserting that Buddhahood is a potential for all people and explaining the principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life is not enough for people to readily accept its truth. What's that basically talking about? Theoretical Ichinen Sanzen is not the same as actual Ichinen Sanzen, and only being able to express theoretical Ichinen Sanzen will never lead to actual Ichinen Sanzen. The only way to lead to actual Ichinen Sanzen is to have examples of actual Ichinen Sanzen. Do you understand? People that already do perceive their lives to be that of the Buddha exactly as they are, without doing anything to change and become some sort of like president of a great lay organization. You don't have to do that to be the Buddha. You don't have to know everything to be the Buddha. The heart is the most important thing. That's what this teaching is about. Right? That's what this Gosho is about. This is for men and women to read, to somehow grasp the depth of the heart and compassion of the mother. Okay? And the resulting sincerity and sense of gratitude that we should have for all living beings as a result, if that's the heart that we have. Do you understand? So, he's saying, where am I? I'm on page 111, right? The actualization of the enlightenment of women reveals the Lotus Sutra's power to enable all people equally to attain Buddhahood. What? Oh, pardon me. No. Thank you. I'm at the bottom of page 110. Yeah. The dragon girl, who in the Lotus Sutra's 12th chapter instantly attains Buddha... No, I already read this. Yeah. Okay. I'll read it again and I'll keep going. I do start it moreover. I accidentally stopped in the middle of a paragraph. I'll begin it again. Bottom of page 110, second column. The dragon girl, who in the Lotus Sutra's 12th chapter instantly attains Buddhahood without changing her form, exemplifies this fundamental principle. That I shown in notes is simply asserting, and again, listen to what I'm saying here, that I shown in notes that simply asserting that Buddhahood is a potential for all living people and explaining the principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life is not enough for people to readily accept its truth. Its truth. Moreover, it is especially difficult for people living in the evil age after the Buddha's passing to understand and believe in the Lotus Sutra's teachings of actual Ichinen Sanzen. However, when the dragon girl showed the gathered assembly actual proof of attaining Buddhahood in her present form, Nichiren says, it convinced everyone that all living beings have the potential to achieve this goal. Do you understand? Right. So he says the actualization of the enlightenment of women reveals the Lotus Sutra's power to enable all people equally to attain Buddhahood. Hence, Nichiren writes in this letter to Shinichi, this is why I say that the enlightenment of women is expounded as a model. While a number of sutras expounded before the Lotus Sutra had mentioned the possibility of women attaining Buddhahood, it was conditional upon their first being reborn as men in a future existence. A similar condition was placed on women seeking to be reborn in the Pure Land, as taught in the Nembutsu school. They could not hope to reach that realm directly in their present form. In these cases, attaining Buddhahood required physical transformation. In contrast, the Daishonin points out that the attainment of Buddhahood by the dragon girl in the Lotus Sutra is instantaneous, achieved by an ordinary being of the 9 worlds. He corroborates this by citing a passage from a commentary by the great teacher Dengyo relating to this event. Through the power of the Lotus Sutra of the wonderful law, one can attain Buddhahood in one's present form. Pardon me. In another letter, Nichiren also states, the heart of the Lotus Sutra is the revelation that one may attain supreme enlightenment in one's present form without altering one's status as an ordinary person. This means that without casting aside one's karmic impediments, in other words, without purifying shit, one can still attain the Buddha way. All right? So he says, that was from, do you remember that? I read this to you. Hakiri Saburo. We can instantly attain perfect enlightenment, he says. The highest stage of practice as an ordinary person at the initial stage of embracing and practicing the Lotus Sutra. Attaining Buddhahood in one's present form, in which ordinary people manifest the life state of Buddhahood just as they are, is the true substance of enlightenment expounded in the Lotus Sutra. What did he just talk about there? What did he just talk about there? He talked about a point of transition right there. I'm going to read that paragraph again. He says, in another letter, Nichiren states, because President Ikeda is trying to talk to you right now, the heart of the Lotus Sutra is the revelation that one may attain supreme enlightenment in one's present form without altering one's status as an ordinary person. We're all ordinary people, right?
Right.
So he's saying we can all attain Buddhahood right now just as we are in this moment, without doing anything else. He says this means that without casting aside our karmic impediments, one can still attain the Buddha way. We don't have to purify, right? He says we can instantly attain perfect enlightenment. What is that saying? What's that talking about? That's Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, right? That's the moment we go from understanding theoretical Buddhahood to yes, that Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, actual Ichinen Sansa. He says we can instantly attain perfect enlightenment, and that happens in a moment. I've discussed this before many times. When you finally get to that point, and you will if you never give up, you will immediately never be able to go back. A change will have occurred in your life. It's like hitting reverse. All right? We can instantly attain perfect enlightenment, the highest stage of practice, the highest stage of practice, right? When we talk about the 6 stages, what are the 6 stages of? That I always go back to. 6 stages of practice, right? Practitioner, the practitioner that does this. Okay, so this isn't just about faith. This is faith that leads to action. He says, as an ordinary person at the initial stage of embracing and practicing the Lotus Sutra, so we have to be masters of this. Attaining Buddhahood in one's present form, in which ordinary people manifest the life state of Buddhahood just as they are. They bring the 10th world out in their 9 worlds, is the true substance of enlightenment that is expounded in the Lotus Sutra. Okay? So when the Lotus Sutra talks about enlightenment, it's talking about actual Ichinen Sansa. Again, in the Devadatta 12th chapter, as actual proof of her having attained Buddhahood in her present form, the Dragon Girl strongly vows to expound the doctrines of the Lotus Sutra to rescue living beings from suffering. This statement truly overflows with joyous resolve. The portrayal of women in the Lotus Sutra, epitomized by the Dragon Girl, is in stark contrast to that of earlier provisional sutras expounded by the Buddha. Reflecting the prevailing attitudes of ancient Indian society, these scriptures went out of their way to stress the faults and karmic impediments of women. This, in effect, robbed women of both hope and dignity, something men have been doing to them for eons. During Nichiren's time, such teachings were widespread in Japan, while the Lotus Sutra was all but ignored. Buddhism had turned into a source of oppression and suffering for women. Because the Daishonin wanted to put an end to this, he sought to draw attention to the Dragon Girl's attainment of enlightenment in her present form. He was driven by a fervent desire to establish a teaching for the happiness of women and mothers and for the inner transformation of all humanity. Nichiren Buddhism is a transformative teaching that enables us to deeply expand our state of life through the power of faith and the power of practice based on the mystic law. I'll reread that sentence. It's pretty powerful. Nichiren Buddhism is a transformative teaching. So what's that say? It means that through this teaching, you will change. You will change without trying to change. You will change naturally. You will change without having to take anybody else's opinion on. If you trust the Lotus Sutra, it will always prove its power to you personally. Your prayer to the Gohonzon will be something between you and the faith of your life and that object of devotion. It can never be taken from you. It can never be painted by somebody else. It's nothing anybody else can see. It's one-on-one. All right? He's saying, Nichiren Buddhism is a transformative teaching. It changes us, that enables us to develop and expand our life state because we change to become Buddhas through the power of faith and the power of practice, because it took both, right? Based on the mystic law. All right? The power of faith derives from believing that we ourselves are inherently entities of the mystic law. That says the faith to believe that we ourselves are Buddhas. All right? that we are Buddhists. I didn't know he was going to finish the sentence. Pardon me. Okay. The power of faith derives from believing that we ourselves are inherently entities of the mystic law, that we are Buddhists. Okay? I'll say it one more time. The power of faith derives from believing. So what do you have faith in?
Believe.
Yeah, but what do you have faith in? That you are the Buddha, that the teaching is correct. Nichiren's saying you're the Buddha. If you don't believe you're the Buddha, you don't believe what Nichiren's saying. It's as simple as that. Right. It's not about being arrogant. It's about slandering the teaching ultimately then. You're basically saying there's no such thing as actual Ichinen Sensen. Or it's not as Nichiren has expressed it. Right? So you must, the power of faith derives from believing the teaching. That's what faith is. Faith is believing the teaching. Okay? The teaching says that we ourselves are inherently Buddhas. Do you understand what he's trying to explain to you?
Yes.
That's not arrogance. That's getting it finally. Okay? That's the difference between stage 2 and stage 5. Do you understand?
Yes.
It's so important. He says the power of practice, meanwhile, derives from chanting the fundamental law for attaining Buddhahood, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and bringing forth our Buddha nature. That means the practice of doing Gongyo, of chanting Daimoku, of sharing faith with others, of caring about other people enough to pray for their happiness, to constantly be moving in the direction that a Buddha would move, which is toward Kosen Rufu, towards the attainment of Kosen Rufu. The Daishonin's vow to enable all women to chant the Daimoku of this sutra might also be described as a vow to realize a reformation in Buddhism that would promote the independence and human revolution of women. In another writing, he states, in the case of the Lotus Sutra, women who receive and uphold it in body, mouth, and mind, and in particular chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo with their mouths, will be able to attain Buddhahood readily, as did the Dragon King's daughter, Gautami, and Yashodhara, who lived at the same time as the Buddha. Note that the use of word readily here. Okay? And what's readily mean then? Readily. Boom, boom, boom. Ready. Not difficult. Boom, boom, boom. That fast. Readily. Boom, boom, boom. You got it? Okay. Readily here. Women who uphold the great law for women's enlightenment have nothing to fear. So you have to worry, when will this ever happen? Will it happen? No. Readily. In a letter addressed to Shinichi a few months later, the Daishonin writes, a woman who embraces the Lion King of the Lotus Sutra never fears any of the beasts of hell or of the realms of hungry spirits and animals. Women who awaken to and uphold the supreme philosophy of the Lotus Sutra, enabling them to bring forth their own innate dignity, are assured of leading the most noble and honorable of lives. You want to change what it's like for women? Be a woman. Be a woman of faith. Really. Save the world. Nichiren continually strove to impart hope to his female followers, writing such words of encouragement as, there is nothing to lament when we consider that we will surely become Buddhists. Or, only in the Lotus Sutra do we read that a woman who embraces this sutra not only excels all other women, but also surpasses all men. And among all of the 2,994,830 women of Japan, you should think of yourself as number 1. All right? Furthermore, in the Sutra of True Requital, he confidently replies to the letter received from Shinichi, assuring her, though the women of Japan may be condemned in all sutras other than the Lotus Sutra as incapable of attaining Buddhahood, as long as the Lotus guarantees their enlightenment, what reason have they to be downcast? The actualization of the enlightenment of women opens the way for all people to realize enlightenment. The irrefutable evidence in the Lotus Sutra of a woman attaining Buddhahood secures the hope that all people can do likewise. Accordingly, the Lotus Sutra is the starting point of a truly people-oriented Buddhism. Continuing with the Gosho on page 113. The Lotus Sutra is the Sutra of True Requital. Now I, Nichiren, was born as a human being, something difficult to achieve, and I have encountered the Buddhist teachings, which are but rarely to be met with. Moreover, among all the teachings of the Buddha, I was able to meet the Lotus Sutra. But when I stop to consider my good fortune, I realize that I am indebted to my parents, indebted to the ruler, and indebted to all living beings. If he comes to that realization, we should hope that we do as well. Okay? Truly. With regard to the debt of gratitude owed to our parents, our father may be likened to heaven and our mother to the earth, and it would be difficult to say to which parent we are more indebted, but it is particularly difficult to repay the great kindness of our mother. Since I have realized that only the Lotus Sutra teaches the attainment of Buddhahood by women, and that only the Lotus Sutra is the Sutra of true requital for repaying the kindness of our mothers, in order to repay my debt to my mother, I have vowed to enable all women to chant the Daimoku of this sutra. Continuing with President Ikeda's lecture on page 113, second column. Nichiren Daishonin keenly felt the debt of gratitude he owed to his parents, who had loved and raised him, likening his father to heaven and his mother to the earth. And he says, it is particularly difficult to repay the great kindness of our mother. So immense is the debt we owe our mothers that we can never hope to fully repay it. In another letter, too, he writes, there is no need at this late date to emphasize how great is the debt one owes to one's father and mother. But I would like to stress that the debt to one's mother is particularly important and worthy to be taken to heart. Furthermore, he says of his studies of the Buddhist scriptures, furthermore, he says his studies of the Buddhist scriptures led him to conclude that only the Lotus Sutra would allow him to repay his debt of gratitude to his mother. For this reason, he says, he vowed to teach all mothers, all women, the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. A vow or commitment gives us the strength to persevere and keep forging ahead in our lives. What did he just say? A vow or commitment gives us the strength to persevere and keep forging ahead in our lives. So what is that vow always based on? Faith. Faith. Okay? And so what is the purpose of the vow? It's to say we promise to uphold something no matter what. So when the no matter what part comes in, so when the difficulties are there rather than the ease and comfort, the vow is the commitment that keeps us going. That's the execution of our faith. Do you understand? Yes. That's why the vow is so important. Commitment is what makes you a bodhisattva of the earth, or a pretender, or just a believer. Do you understand? You must be a practitioner if you're going to lead people to the attainment of actual Ichen and Sanzen. A vow or commitment gives us the strength to persevere and keep forging ahead in our lives. It gives us the power to repel adversity. For example, in his treatise, The Opening of the Eyes, Nichiren pledges never to falter in his efforts to lead people to enlightenment, regardless of the great obstacles and persecutions he may encounter. He writes that the trials he has faced during his exile on Sado Island, far from extinguishing the flame of his commitment, have only strengthened it, making him all the more determined to become the pillar of Japan and to never forsake this vow. Now, do you understand what he just said? That's the important thing. When you've taken the vow, you have no idea how many times I've been in front of the Gohonzon going through extreme difficulty, going through a period of time when I was chanting and chanting about the resolution of something that I needed to have resolved. And I was meeting more difficulty rather than resolution. Okay, what keeps me going at those times? It's my vow and the faith that I have that I am the Buddha. And I know that when I'm in those moments, I am being challenged by the three powerful enemies in some form. It's definitely the devil of the sixth heaven. And so I just say, you get with me as much as you want. I won't quit. I won't quit. I say to the Gohonzon, keep it up. Just like what he's saying here. Just makes it, he says, have only, that rather, this is a great sentence because this is the correct attitude. He writes that the trials he has faced during his exile on Sado Island, which are like, kill me, right? Are far from extinguishing the flame of his commitment, have only strengthened it, making him all the more determined to become the pillar of Japan and to never forsake his vow. So I already know when I'm being attacked by the devil of the sixth heaven, it's important for me to go, bring it on. Bring it on. You can't win. You might as well go hide. And that's what happens almost every time when I get to that point. Okay? So, I really encourage you to understand what it is you're experiencing in your daily life when you're progressing through life. Okay? And if you're progressing toward Buddhahood, you are going to face difficulty, and you're going to face the same kinds of things Nichiren has. And that's why he wrote these letters, and that's why he needed to encourage the people that he was raising at that time. And that's why President Ikeda has written this lecture, is to convey the correct teaching and the correct way to practice so that you can have correct faith, so that you can win. Because Buddhism is primarily about winning or being defeated. We never are defeated when we practice with this kind of spirit of faith, ever. At the heart of his pledge for the salvation of all people expressed in the opening of the eyes is Nichiren's wish to repay his debt of gratitude to his mother and enable all people to attain enlightenment. Indeed, we can see in the Sutra of True Requital that the enlightenment of his mother was a fundamental goal driving him. Buddhism should be the ally of those experiencing the greatest suffering. Because it opens the door to enlightenment for women who had been long rejected and repudiated by traditional Buddhism, Nichiren Buddhism is a teaching that can genuinely help free all people from suffering in the latter day of the law. Kosen Rufu is a struggle to build an age in which women can truly savor the joy of living. Kosen Rufu is a struggle to build an age in which women can truly savor the joy of living. It is the actualization of the Buddha's vow to strive so that mothers throughout the world can experience supreme happiness. What is that based on, though? The true equality of all living beings. Because if we think of the world right now, there's still a disparate difference between men and women. Okay? Women are not embraced in the way that this teaching is saying that they should be. All right? It's not a weakness in men to be able to perceive this wisdom and do what they can to make it so. Okay? It's not turning over their manhood or any weird shit like that. Okay? It's wisdom. He says, Kosen Rufu. So world peace, going back to the beginning of that paragraph. Kosen Rufu, world peace, widespread propagation, is a struggle. It's an endeavor that will be met with difficulty, but those difficulties will be overcome. To build an age in which women can truly savor the joy of equality. All right? It is the actualization of the Buddha's vow for the equality of all living beings. It's not based on sex anymore. It's not based on where you live. Do you understand? He says, continuing, the Daishonin believed that only by making it possible for his own mother to attain enlightenment would he be able to lead all women to enlightenment. Viewed from the Buddhist principle of dependent origination, each person we come into contact with is connected to the rest of humanity. I've said this to you many times. Do you understand what he's saying there? We are all connected to everyone else through those that we are connected to that we know. Do you understand? It's sort of like that second, third degree, or seventh degree of separation thing that people talk about. You know, everybody knows everybody else with 7 links of other people. I don't know if it's true or not. But the point is that according to Buddhism, there is no separation between our life and all other life. Any other life. Right? So he says, the Buddhist scriptures offer the beautiful metaphor of Indra's net to explain this interconnectedness of all life. Buddhism is based on a principle that says all life is connected. It's all interconnected. That's what dependent origination is all about. We all give rise. Why? Because of one another. That's the influence that makes us manifest. What makes us manifest? All the other entities around us manifesting. Because we're all in this beautiful concert of cause and effect with one another. We're going to meet bugs that only we meet. We're going to see trees and leaves that only we see. Where everything is beautifully connected. Okay? The Buddhist scriptures offer the beautiful metaphor of Indra's net to explain this interconnectedness of all life. The heavenly palace of the god Indra is adorned with a magnificent net of jewels. A brilliant jewel is attached to each knot of the net, with each jewel reflecting all the others. When one jewel moves in the breeze, all the other jewels sparkle in many different colors. In the same way, each of us is like a knot in an infinite web of mutual interrelationships. When one knot moves, everything begins to move in a great ripple effect. Did you hear what he just said there? He says, he's talking about in the same way each of us is like these knots that reflect all other things. It's saying exactly what I just said a minute ago, right? In an infinite web of mutually interrelationships. When one knot moves, everything begins to move in a great ripple effect. That's why you can do Kosen Rufu yourself. You don't need other people. All right? It is indeed true that everything begins with one individual. One is the mother. Remember from last week? This is none other than the transformational principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. Okay, this is nothing more than Ichinen Sanzen. Returning to the Daishonen's vow, another important point is that it arose from the natural human sentiment of wanting to repay his debt of gratitude to his mother. My mentor, Josei Toda, often taught that showing love and care for our parents is vital for gaining a compassionate state of often taught that showing love and care for our parents is vital for gaining the compassionate state of mind of the Buddha. He was always urging the youth to treasure their parents. He once scolded a youth who acted without thought of his parents. Are you oblivious to your mother's tears? I recall one time when Mr. Toda asked about my mother. When I told him she was doing fine, he said with a tender expression, "Our mother's smiling face stays with us as long as we live. It's that way for me, and I'm sure it will be the same for you." Mr. Toda fondly remembered the love and warm concern his mother had for him. Until his dying day, he treasured the hand-sewn hontun, I'm probably mispronouncing that, a traditional lined robe from Hokkaido, that she had made for him to take to Tokyo. Handing it to him as he was preparing to leave his hometown to seek his fortune in the big city, his mother told him, "If you wear this as you work, no matter how difficult things may be, you can accomplish anything." Many years later, when he returned home from his wartime imprisonment by the militarist government and found his robe safe, he said, "Since this hantan has survived, I know I'll be all right." He always cherished his mother's prayers. In a well-known piece of guidance addressed to the youth, Mr. Toda wrote, "There are so many young people who are incapable of having compassion for their own parents." Note that he's making this clear to us. We can't be that way, and when we see young people that way, we should try and help them understand the truth. There are so many young people who are incapable of having compassion for their own parents. How can they be expected to care about perfect strangers? The effect to overcome the coldness and indifference in our own lives and attain the same state of compassion as the Buddha is the essence of human revolution. That's why he said transformative teaching. You will change. It's okay if you start this way. You will change. I have constantly called on young people to have compassion for their parents and to be good sons and daughters. It is my belief that youth who have this spirit will grow into people who can positively contribute to the welfare of society and their fellow human beings. Having compassion for one's parents is an important guideline for human revolution. Trust me, that's true. And don't worry, if I run out of time, I run out of time, but I'm going to keep going. He says, going on with the Gosho, remaining steadfast in one's commitment at the top of the second column, page 115. Buddhism in Japan today is exactly like this. It is merely plots and rebellions in a different form. The Lotus Sutra represents the true ruler, while the True Word School, Pure Land School, Zen School, and Precepts priests, by upholding such minor sutras as the Mahavajrana Sutra and the Meditation on the Buddha Infinite Life Sutra, have become the deadly enemies of the Lotus Sutra. And yet, women throughout Japan, unaware of the ignorance of their own minds, think that Nichiren, who can save them, is their foe, and mistake the Nimbutsu Zen precepts and True Word priests, who are in fact deadly enemies, for good friends and teachers. And because they look upon Nichiren, who is trying to save them, as a deadly enemy, These women all joined together to slander him to the ruler of the country, so that after having been exiled to the province of Izu, he was also exiled to the province of Sato. This will touch on what I talked about last week. When Nichiren Daishonin embarked on his struggle to propagate the mystic law, arrogant false sages, the third and most formidable of the three powerful enemies, attacked him unrelentingly, just as predicted in the Lotus Sutra. Remember me talking about Ryokan, two fires? Through their scheming, he was persecuted and exiled by the ruling authority. Disturbingly, women played a key role in his harassment. Misled by these corrupt, self-serving priests, they actively sought to have him discredited. Though Nichiren was the greatest champion of women's enlightenment and strove tirelessly for women's happiness, women throughout the land regarded him with hostility. This was truly a perverse and ridiculous state of affairs, starkly illustrating the frightening nature of slandering the law. Starkly illustrating the frightening nature of slandering the law, because that's what creates the karma to do what those women did. Slandering the law is what creates the effect that makes you slander the law. That makes you slander the law. Do you understand? Slandering the law is the cause to continue to slander the law. All right? Upholding the law is the cause to advance. Do you understand? So he's saying, at that time, so why do women have it so bad? Cause and effect is absolute. There's a karma involved in all of this. I'm not saying less or more. I'm saying different. Do you understand? Do you understand? You guys know. Menstrual cycles, giving birth, all that stuff. You know, it's why women are so respect-worthy. You have a more difficult life than we do as men. He says, at the time, faith in the teaching of the Nembutsu school was widespread, and its adherents dismissed the Lotus Sutra. Therefore, motivated by his ardent wish to save the women of Japan, the Daishonin firmly refuted the Nembutsu practice of chanting the name of Amida Buddha, saying, since it is not the seed of Buddhahood, they will never become Buddhas. His arguments were based on solid documentary and theoretical proof. However, women who had been deceived by the words of the Nembutsu priests saw Nichiren's criticism as only a personal attack. They eventually came to regard him as a deadly enemy of the Buddha. In this letter, he indicates that among the driving forces behind his exiles to Izu and Sato were slanderous rumors that high-ranking women had told the ruling authorities. During his exile to Sato in particular, the influential True Word precepts priest Ryokan of Gorakuji Temple in Kamakura and his cohorts colluded to incite the mother of the current regent of Hojo, Tokimuni, and other well-connected women to urge action against Nichiren. So again, that's how Ryokan pulled it off. He got in the ear of all the wives of all the guys that had power and swords. These women lobbied powerful government officials who stealthily set about repressing his activities. This was a case of slanderous priests taking advantage of the sincere faith of women who believed in their teachings to initiate a crackdown on the Daishonin and lead them to slander. Do you understand? Lead them to the hell of incessant suffering, frankly. Such priests can only be described as enemies of the Lotus Sutra, or expressed another way, enemies of a people-centered Buddhism and enemies of all women. And what he's reaching out to say here is in code he's saying that's true today. He's making this statement about 13th century Japan, okay? But what he's saying, it's not a requalification of the truth. Right now, everything he just said, such priests, wherever they exist in this moment also, can only be described as enemies of the Lotus Sutra, or expressed another way, enemies of a people-centered equality for all, Buddhism, and enemies of all women, because they're all teaching teachings that don't allow for women to attain Buddhism in their Buddhahood in their present form. Nichiren also deplored the behavior of these women who were being manipulated to speak out against him when he was the very one committed to helping women attain enlightenment. He describes them as having of being unaware of the ignorance of their own minds. The ignorance that allows one to be blinded by slander of the law and prevents one from believing in the correct teaching is truly frightening. That's that ignorance. The Daishonin had stood up with an infinite spirit of compassion to widely communicate the Buddha's true teaching, seeking to dispel the ignorance shrouding people's lives and lead them to enlightenment, including even those who had attacked and persecuted him. He therefore worked tirelessly to help women attain Buddhahood, irrespective of the storms of obstacles he encountered. The Lotus Sutra teaches that men and women are equally noble and respect-worthy. In the Teacher of the Law, the Sutra's 10th chapter, the Buddha instructs good men and women to expound the law in his stead after his passing. And in the Bodhisattva Never Disparaging, its 20th chapter, Bodhisattva Never Disparaging shows equal reverence to all the four kinds of believers, monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen, eloquently attesting to the fact that women of every sphere too possess the Buddha nature and are worthy of praise and veneration. For a long time in the history of Buddhism, however, this precious truth was forgotten, and as a result, women were caused great suffering. For this reason, by Nichiren dedicating his life to realizing the enlightenment of women, it can be said that he severed this misguided legacy and enacted a great transformation that revived Buddhism as a religion of true equality. There should be no discrimination among those who propagate the 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo in the latter day of the law, be they men or women, from the true aspect of all phenomena. As these words indicate, the mission and practice of bodhisattvas of the earth, who strive to lead all humanity to genuine happiness based on the mystic law, are firmly grounded in a view of humanity and the world in which both men and women are equal. That is a philosophy of complete gender equality. All right? Our efforts for Kosen Rufu today exactly accord with the spirit. And by the way, this is not evident in Buddhism. Generally today, this is the 21st century. This still, men are men and women are less. Yeah. Everywhere else. Okay? Daisaku Ikeda is saying, better not be in my Soka Gakkai. He is qualifying those of us at chant Nam Myoho Renge-kyo, whether we have one set of sex organs or another, we're all equal. We're all human beings. We're all the same. Yes. We're all here for the same purpose. There is no separation between any of us. There's no steps two. Okay? He says, our efforts for Kosen Rufu today exactly accord with the spiritual struggle wagered by Nichiren based on his vow to lead all people to enlightenment. He's saying, so it's the same thing today. We're still struggling in the same shit. There is no doubt that the development of our grassroots people's movement, which inherits the original Buddhist spirit of respect for all human beings, will shine brightly in the future, in future annals of history. Wow, will you let me go? No, okay. Okay, continuing. Appreciation for the noble struggles of women practitioners. Second column, page 117. Nevertheless, when I was exiled to the province of Sado, the constable of the province and other officials, following the design of the ruler of the nation, treated me with animosity. Every single steward and Nembutsu believer worthy of the name kept strict watch on my hut day and night, determined to prevent anyone from communicating with me. Never in any lifetime will I forget how in those circumstances you, with the Butsubo carrying a wooden container of food on his back, came in the night again and again to bring me aid. It was just as if my deceased mother had suddenly been reborn in the province of Sado. Here Nichiren reiterates his appreciation to Shinichi. While he was experiencing the extreme conditions of exile on Sado, she came to his aid and assistance despite great personal risk, based on a spirit of selfless dedication to her faith. So extraordinary were her efforts and devotion that he exclaims, it was as if my deceased mother had suddenly been reborn in the province of Sado. And he further praises her by saying, you must be a woman who has made offerings to 100,000 million Buddhas, 10 billion Buddhas. He further lauds her constant devotion and support, which has remained unchanged even after he moved far away from Sado, writing, how great is your sincerity! It is firmer than the great earth, deeper than the great sea. The dedicated faith and practice of the Daishonin's female disciples provided him with a source of support and protection as he conducted his activities as a votary of the Lotus Sutra. He genuinely valued and appreciated women's sensitivity, resourcefulness, consideration, care, and concern for others, and personal strength in faith. It could be said that the noble wisdom and compassion of mothers manifest in the faith of women practitioners who strive to uphold and protect the law. So in Nichiren's day, while there were women who, regardless of their social standing, clearly misinterpreted and distorted the Buddha's teachings and attacked the Daishonin out of ignorance, there were also a growing number of women who earnestly practiced Nichiren's teaching and took part in the struggle to share it widely with others. These practitioners were surely the greatest proof that steady progress was being made in efforts to propagate the mystic law in this evil age. They were proof that people dominated by the three poisons of greed, anger, and foolishness were being guided to the path of Buddhahood and striving to elevate the life state of the entire nation. The widespread propagation of the mystic law in the latter day is also a tenacious struggle to awaken one person after another to the mission of the bodhisattvas of the earth, a mission ultimately shared by all people. By all people. The female followers striving alongside Nichiren were truly trailblazers of women's attainment of Buddhahood in the latter day and could perhaps be regarded as pioneers of women's liberation. Among them were young widows, bereaved mothers, childless women, wives who were caring for sick husbands or who were ill themselves, daughters-in-law who were nursing aged mothers-in-law, women who were worried about their husbands, inconsistent Buddhist practice. Okay? Women who were worried about their husbands' inconsistent Buddhist practice, and the list goes on. All of them were valiantly challenging their own problems and karma as they continued to make efforts to share the mystic law with those around them. Do you understand? They were all doing Jigyo Keita. They were all practicing for themselves and others, just as the Buddha teaches, just as Nichiren has taught us. They waged a great struggle to show actual proof of the enlightenment of women as taught in Nichiren Buddhism. They changed from women who wept over their fate to women who brimmed, I'm going to start crying, with a sense of purpose and mission. Women who proudly upheld the mystic law and displayed their great wisdom and compassion through courage. As disciples, they believed wholeheartedly in the sincerity and integrity of the Daishonin and his wish for the happiness of all women, and they proudly walked the path of mission and true fulfillment that he taught. As long as such a noble realm of mentor and disciple exists, genuine lasting happiness is certain to spread among women throughout the world. Caring for the safety and welfare of his disciples, on page 119. At the end of the Sutra of True Requital, Nichiren Daishonin describes how concerned he has been for the welfare of his disciples. Not only were epidemics raging throughout the land and claiming many lives, but fear and uncertainty reigned due to the prospect of a second Mongol invasion. The Daishonin was especially worried about the safety and welfare of his followers on distant Sato, who had risked their lives to support him during his exile there. Perhaps as a consequence of the widespread epidemics, the number of messengers bringing news to him from Sato may have decreased from his correspondence with people on the island. Decreased. For his correspondence with the people on the island appears to have almost come to a complete halt. There are in fact no extant letters by Nichiren sent to followers on Sato during the previous year of 1277. While praying for the well-being of his followers, he must nevertheless have felt a mounting sense of concern. Just at that time, a Butsubo unexpectedly visited the Daishonin's hermitage at Minobu. The first thing Nichiren did was ask about all his followers on Sato. A Butsubo replied that fortunately no one had fallen ill in the epidemic and everyone was fine. Part of their exchange regarding the welfare of various individuals on Sato is recorded in this letter. The Daishonin was overjoyed to learn that everyone was safe and sound, writing that when I heard all this, I felt as if I were a blind man who had recovered his sight, or as if my deceased father and mother had come to me in a dream from the palace of King Yama. And in that dream, I had felt great joy. How moved Shinichi must have been to receive this letter overflowing with the Daishonin's warmth and thoughtful concern. I picture Nichiren writing about his conversation with the Butsubo, and while doing so, fondly calling to mind the smiling face of Shinichi, his mother on Sato Island, who would read his words. A genuine mentor is constantly concerned about the health and safety of each disciple and always prays wholeheartedly for their development and growth. It's real. It's not for show. I am convinced that the community of believers on Sato had developed to the extent it had because, though separated from the Daishonin by mountain and sea, their hearts were perfectly aligned and united with his. They thought only of their mentor and sought him single-mindedly. Today, in an age that has seen the vibrant rebirth of Nichiren Buddhism through the efforts of the SGI, there are countless women like Shinichi. I'm surrounded by them right now. Mothers of Kosen Rufu in Japan and around the world who are supporting their fellow members with care and compassion and wisely fostering the development of the youth. They are noble and respect-worthy without compare. I, too, offer my deepest appreciation for them with my palms pressed together in reverence. The women of Soka, the mothers of Kosen Rufu, could also be described as mothers of the local community who have helped pave the way to the happiness of many women, and as mothers of humanism have opened up the path for the enlightenment of women into the eternal future. When the compassion of mothers everywhere illuminates all humanity, and when all humanity respects the wish for peace cherished by mothers everywhere, the very tenor of modern civilization will undergo a momentous change. Wow, is that true? Today, our Women's Division members are drawing wide praise around the globe, and members of our Young Women's Ikeda Keiokai are following brightly in their footsteps. They represent hope for humankind. The sun of great hope has arisen. My mentor, Mr. Toda, who declared that Kosen Rufu would be achieved through the power of women, must be overjoyed. I can proudly report to him that a solid foundation has been laid for a century of respect for life, a century of women, and a century of peace. In order to repay my debt to my mother, this vibrant pledge of the Daishonin to open the way for the enlightenment of all women is our pledge as members of Soka. It is our wish. No, it is our vow. We will build a society in which all mothers and children can live in happiness and peace. This is the purpose of Kosen Rufu and the focus of establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land. Now I wish to pass on to all of you the baton of our struggle to fulfill this great vow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.